Hello Biomed colleagues, I am Heidi Hesrick and today I'm going to show you how to set up Module 2 of EdvoTech Kit 491. This is the kit that we are using for the new Principles of Biomed curriculum for the 114 lab. And before you do this part, you're going to want to do the presumptive blood tests. I've already made a video about how to set up the presumptive blood test, so if you have not watched that one yet, watch. The link is in the description to this video. And I would do these on separate days. So one day to do the presumptive blood testing, and then the next day or the day after, if you need some time to process the presumptive, move to the confirmatory blood testing. So we are going to be doing the ABO blood typing. Again, it's Module 2 of EdvoTech Kit 491. And if you don't teach Biomet, there is a comparable kit from EdvoTech. And that kit is discussed in the description to this video. Thank you so much to EdvoTech for supplying this kit to me so that I could make this video. I really appreciate it. This video is solely for teachers, so if you're a student watching this, you're going to be bored. I'm going to show how to do the teacher prep. There will be a separate video for students and how to run this lab, but this is all about how to get it set up. You should have the full instructor's guide from EdvoTech. In order to get that, there's a sheet inside your kit that has the URL to it, but it's going to tell you in the instructor's guide that to set this up, you need to do it no more than 24 hours before the lab, and it'll take 30 to 40 minutes. I know that for all of us, that is a struggle. So one question that's come up is, can we do it more than 24 hours in advance? What if we have hybrid students and we're seeing students every other day? And I'm going to try to answer that question. So I'm going to make a bunch of these, and then I'm going to run it 24 hours after, 48 hours after, 72 hours after. And if you look at the description of the video, I'll tell you how that went and really how long you have before these reagents no longer work effectively, because I know most of us want to do that kind of thing in advance. One part you can do anytime in advance is label the tubes. And it's an easy thing to do. Just sit and watch Netflix while you do it. So I'm going to show you how to do the tube labeling. Do this whenever you're ready, and then aliquot beforehand. That'll save you some time. For the tube labeling, this sheet is going to be your BFF. It comes in the box with the instructions on how to get your reagents and where to find the teacher's guide, and it's all these stickers, so you don't have to get a Sharpie out. You can just stick stickers to tubes. You can see that there is a column for every lab group. It's enough to make 10 lab sets and a row for each reagent. So there are actually 14 different reagents that you'll be aliquoting. So you need 14 tubes per lab group for up to 10 lab groups. My tip is, if you don't have 10 lab groups, don't take the time to label enough tubes for 10 lab groups. I am going to just label enough for 8 lab groups because generally I have 7 groups at a time. And I make one extra set in case a group screws up. So you will see me labeling for 8 lab groups, which means I need 8 times 14 tubes. So I've already laid those out on my table. Each little pile is 8 tubes, and I have 14 piles. And now I'm just gonna chill and maybe watch some Real Housewives while I label all these tubes. Okay, I've now labeled 8 times 14 tubes. I decided I love these little labels. This is the first time I've ever done a kit with labels. I was wrong. They have enough labels to do 11. So there were 3 left of each. And I liked them because it was faster to label and they're easier to read. But also having it on the sheet like this made it easy for me to know when I had done exactly 8 and I could move to the next group. So you're going to have your A blood, your B blood, your AB, and your O, all of those knowns. Then you're going to have 8 of the crime scene 1, 8 of the crime scene 2. So these represent the blood at the scene on the edge of the lab table and on the floor. Then we have our 5 persons of interest, and every student will get 1 of each person of interest. And we have Anna Garcia, and then we have our anti-A and our anti-B serums. So this can be done again anytime in advance. I did time myself, and it took me a little less than 15 minutes to label all the tubes, but it's also something I could have had my 10-year-old do and given her $1, or you could have a student do this who finishes their work early. So since this can be done anytime in advance, decide how you want to go about that. But this part can be pretty simple to just farm out to someone else or to do when you have 15 minutes in front of a TV. All of your Module 2 reagents are in a separate bag inside of the big bag that the kit components come in, so they should be separated modules 1, 2, and 3. So go ahead and get out all the module 2 components and line them up. I lined these up in a way that made sense to me. So I have my anti-A and B serums. I have my control blood samples, A, B, AB, and O. I have crime scene sample 1 and 2. I have my 5 persons of interest, Eric, Sam, Dominique, Taylor, and Dr. Opal. Then I have my Anna Garcia, and I have the red dye concentrate, which we're going to have to add to the samples. For the time being, we're going to set aside the antibody serums. We need to add 50 microliters of the red dye to each of the tubes. So this is all of the control tubes. Since they all fit in my rack except the big one, I've just lined them up. So we have our 4 control tubes, we have our Anna Garcia and the 2 crime scene tubes, and we have our 5 persons of interest. And each of these is going to get 50 microliters of the red dye. I have adjusted my micropipetter to 50 microliters, and I'm just going to invert my dye a little, and then I will pipette up and down a few times before I start aliquoting as well in order to mix it. So that was step 2 in the teacher directions in the manual, and as you could see, I used a separate tip each time because I was pipetting up and down to mix the reagents, and I've now added the red dye to every sample that's supposed to have the red dye, and we're going to move on to step 3. Just in terms of your preparation, I timed myself and it took me 7 minutes to do step 2. We're now on step 3 of the reagent preparation. So we are now going to add 1 milliliter of control blood sample B, which is why this is in a bigger tube, and 1 of that into the AB tube, the AB control, and 1 of that will go into the SAM green tube, and then we will cap and mix well. So that took me 2 minutes, and instead of using a micropipetter, since mine only goes up to 200, the one I have, I decided to use a graduated pipette and just go to the 1 mil line to make it go a little faster. And I did mix each time by pipetting up and down. However, it really filled it all the way to the brim, so just be aware of that. It kind of wanted to spill over when you add an entire milliliter, of the B solution. So now we have every solution ready, and our next step is going to be step 4, where we aliquot every blood sample. So we're doing every single thing except the anti-A and anti-B serum, and we're aliquoting 100 microliters for every single thing. You can see that I have changed my pipetter so that it's set at 100 microliters, and then as I do each sample, I'm going to first gather those 8 tubes, and then I'm going to make sure that I have the right sample to aliquot into those tubes. Then I will put the sample that I'm about to aliquot into my tube rack along with my 8 tubes that I'm going to aliquot into. And I will just repeat that for all 12 of the samples. Again, you're doing this for everything except for the antibody serums. It took me 1.5 minutes to aliquot the 8 tubes. I did realize something as I was doing it. You could actually, I usually keep the original tube and what's left in it as a backup in case somebody runs out of reagents, but you could also use it to make an extra bag. So instead of making 8 bags, I could make 9 with what's left over in this tube and just give one group the original tubes. So now I'm going to aliquot all my other samples. Okay, I have my 4 known blood samples aliquoted, and I am now going to move on to my crime scene samples, my persons of interest, and Anna Garcia. I have now aliquoted all of the blood samples. It took me slightly less than 20 minutes. I demoed it for a few and then figured you get the idea, it's all the same. But now we've run into a problem because we are supposed to fill the anti-A and anti-B tubes. We're supposed to fill the anti-A and anti-B tubes with the serum, but these are only 0.5 milliliter microcentrifuge tubes, and we're supposed to transfer 700 microliters in, so it is going to spill over if I attempt to use these small tubes. Luckily, I do have 1 mil microcentrifuge tubes around, so I'm going to go ahead and swap out the labels onto the bigger tubes. As I said, I would definitely use the 1 mil microcentrifuge tubes if you have any around. My kit did not come with them, but I think most of us have these in our classroom. If you can't do it, an alternative is to fill the 0.5s that they gave you with 700 as best you can. Just be aware that it's going to be full to the very brim and maybe a little squeezing out of the top. And they do actually need 600 microliters total, so you don't have a lot of wiggle room. So if you don't give them at least 600 microliters, they're going to run out. Even if you do, they might because of their pipetting skills. I'm going to transfer the anti-A serum, and when I do it, we need 700 microliters. My pipette only goes to 2, and I want any time-saving methods that I possibly can. So I'm going to use a transfer pipette. Each of my microcentrifuge tubes is graduated. So between the 0.5 and the 1, there is a 0.75. And I'm just going to go ahead and give them 750 microliters approximately, so they have a little extra. I should have enough because I'm only making 8. You can measure this more precisely if you want, but I don't see the necessity of that. Okay, be aware there is not a ton of wiggle room in the reagents. So with 8 of these 1 mil tubes, I was just able to fill each one to about where it meets the rack, and that's a little more than 750 microliters, but there was no more. So if I were going to do an entire 10 tubes, I would have to be more precise and really stop at 700, or you're going to run out of reagents. But that was super quick to fill them that way. Each one I just filled roughly equally, and they're getting a little more than 700. Here is my final prep so far. I'm not going to lie, this one takes a while to set up. It is a good 40 minutes unless you're faster than me, maybe 45. You can cut about 15 minutes off by pre-labeling your tubes, but I think you have about a 30-minute task with all the aliquoting involved, and I will show you the final steps to get your bags ready for your kids. In front of you here, you'll see everything students need to complete this lab. They'll need a 20 to 200 micropipetter. They'll need a tube rack for their microcentrifuge tubes. They'll also need the tips that go with the micropipetter. There is a handout in the comments that you can print and give to the kids. In terms of their aliquoted reagents, they'll need the A, B, and O controls, crime scenes 1 and 2, and then Anna Garcia, the 5 persons of interest, the anti-A and anti-B antibodies, and then they'll need 2 strips of well plates to complete their reaction. You have a couple choices. One is to put all of these items, except for, well, all of these items right here, into a bag, as well as the handout. The other option is to just go ahead and put each of your tubes into the microtube rack and stick these in the fridge until tomorrow. So if you were planning this a day in advance and you had made all your tubes, sometimes I like to do it this way and just put all the racks in the fridge, and then right beforehand I can pull the racks out and the reagents are chilled and ready to go. So that's another option. Sometimes though I do it in bags. Oops. And just label the bags. But for this time I'm going to demo it this way. So on the day of the lab, they would come out to their lab station and this is what they would see. Ignore all the little tubes in the background. So each team would have this at their lab station, and then they can just open up the handout and get started. It turns out prepping that on my back porch when it's like 90 degrees out was super, super hot, but also kind of fun. So next up, I'm going to test out the lab and make the student video. So that won't be posted immediately, but if you subscribe to the channel, look out, it will be posted within the next 24 hours. And that way you can do this to set up your lab, and then there will be a student video so the students can watch and see how to run the lab, And then if they're not able to run the lab at home, I will demo the lab and show them the results so that they can still figure out how to interpret the results. If you end up having any tips or tricks on how to make the setup of this lab easier or how to make the lab run really well, please comment them below.